My father and I spent a lot of time in connection with couches. He'd lie on the couch, and I would talk to my father about all kinds of things, all kinds of interesting questions, some of those great conversations that he and I had. But the story and the length of time that took place between our having knowledge of something called multiple sclerosis from the father of neurology and our having really the first kinds of effective treatments for multiple sclerosis, it does tend to make me just a little bit angry. Not angry at anybody, not angry at Dad Carswell, but angry at the reality that we live in. And anger is clearly it's not a very useful emotion. But I do find that it's been a long, long time. One of the things that is heartening, however, that starts to give me hope is that the progress that we've seen in multiple sclerosis over the last 20 years far outstrips the progress that we saw in all of the other decades between Carswell and Charcot and the present. So that tends to give me some measure of hope. And I have some measure of hope also because of people whom I meet, like the people whom I meet in this room. Scientists like Dale and doctors like Randy who dedicate entire careers to trying to help people with multiple sclerosis or trying to discover the cause and perhaps better treatments for multiple sclerosis. I'm encouraged by people like my friend Maureen, the talented individual who's dedicated her career to helping to lead this strong chapter. So actually my hope, which is a mature emotion, tends to outstrip my anger about what's happened with multiple sclerosis. Tom said earlier today that he thought that hope was sometimes an inadequate response. And I do agree with what Tom said to an extent. It's sort of like the biblical injunction about faith and works. Faith without works is dead. Hope without some measure of personal action also is fairly passive. But hope is probably the best thing that we can hold on to. Emily Dickinson said something very cryptic about hope. She said that hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Hope is the opposite of fatalism, and it's not the same thing as optimism, which is fairly passive. But hope is an active reaching out for a better world one day, and the belief that one day, if we continue to take action as a group, that we will reach a world that is free from multiple sclerosis. But I said that I spent a lot of time on the couch worrying, and obviously in my capacity as the chair of the National MS Society, I tend to worry not only about the research that needs to bear more fruit, but I worry about our organization as well. I worry about our approach to the MS movement as well. I sometimes think that we are too organizationally passive, that we're recumbent, that we're lying on the couch just way too much. I was encouraged last night when I heard a state representative from Minnesota talk forcefully about how persons with disabilities ought not to be holding out their hands as if they're seeking alms from the legislature, but rather should recognize the political power that they have and demand what their constituencies need from a legislature. Now, I know this chapter is much more forceful and much more sophisticated than most, but I still think there is much that we can do. And that same legislator made the very important point that we should not be passive simply because of a change in administrations and think that everything's going to be delivered to groups which are advocating on behalf of persons with disabilities. She didn't put it this way, but she indicated that we who advocate on behalf of people with MS and all persons with disabilities, we don't have any permanent friends, and we don't have any permanent enemies. We only have permanent interests. So, as we're here tonight to celebrate the Sylvies, I don't want to lecture the volunteers and the donors for this wonderful chapter, but I would indeed like to challenge us to see what more we can do to stretch ourselves and to be a better MS society. Like Randy, I knew Sylvia Lowry, and Sylvia Lowry was one tough person. Sylvia Lowry was a very demanding leader, and she did not suffer passivity lightly. And I think as we celebrate Sylvia tonight, through awards which are in her name, that we ought to dedicate ourselves to be active ourselves in every sense of that term. We went through a big change in the National MS Society this year, and I know we generated a lot of controversy with some of the things that we were asking the MS Society to do. But I challenge all of you that there is something missing in the MS Society when we don't have the fervor and the energy and the accomplishment that we have here in Minnesota throughout our system. I'm also reminded of that biblical injunction about how are they going to know unless someone teach them. And I think there is much that the people in this room could do to teach people in the more underserved areas of the United States about what an MS society can be, while at the same time challenging ourselves still even here in Minnesota to be an even better MS society. There is much, much work to be done. It is great to come together and to celebrate, but if we only sit down and celebrate and we do not challenge ourselves to look toward the future and to be more active than we are, then we're not doing honor to the people whom we purport to serve, and we're not doing honor to the memory of our founder, Sylvia Lowry. I know that all of you will do honor to that. I thank all of you for your generosity and for your energy, and I thank you for the privilege of being with you tonight. Good night.